Welcome to the Vortex Nation podcast, brought to you by lovers of hunting, shooting, public lands, the Second Amendment, and good food. All right, in our little podcast pre-talk here, we discussed a lot of ways to open this up. I think there's many options. One is we could read the last post, or one of the most recent posts from our friend Ryan Muggener, and it's fun reading his post when he's not here especially. I'm going to do that here real quick. He has a picture of a campfire on his Instagram page. You should check him out, RyanM_82. Very, how would you describe his posts? They're very in-depth.
They're poetic.
They're poetic.
They're thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Eloquent.
Eloquent is a good way to put it. So here's a picture of a campfire and his boot. As I sit and watch this fire burn for hours, I consider the trees, collectively hundreds of years of growth and seasons changing, intense summer heat and drought, and a killing winter's winds. What once weighed hundreds of pounds in front of me reduced to maybe a dozen. What once could have built a small fort now sits in a flour sack. The question at hand, does the tree live to inspire through surviving untold hardship in the weather, to leave a carcass to dry in the sun, or does the tree live to inspire through a brilliant, luminous, and warming display only to be reduced to carbon at my feet? Perspective, I suppose.
Do we need to break that apart?
Chicken or the egg, really.
That's a lot.
I think trees go through the winter and they're like, it's pretty cold out, but it's going to get warm out soon. Or in the summer, they're kind of like, well, it's pretty nice out right now, but it's going to get cold out later.
That's one way of thinking of it. Last time we read one of Ryan's posts on from Instagram on the podcast, he came up to me after the podcast and said, oh, great, now everybody's going to think I'm eating mushrooms. And I was like, maybe you should just quit being so poetic all the time, man.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Only when they're in season. So you don't really eat mushrooms.
I tell you what, I read that when he posted it, and he had my mind all twisted up.
Yeah.
What was that when I called?
You actually commented, quit blowing my mind.
Yeah.
I think I called Mark right after he read that because he was a little bit teared up, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I'll call you back, man.
If we've poetically
Can't talk right now crying.
If we've poetically lulled anybody in their car to sleep, and we apologize after reading that, it's beautiful word tree.
Yep.
All right. Real topic at hand. Adam and Reuben, you guys got back very recently from a match. What was it called again?
It was the United Multigun League Traditional Nationals.
Okay, so it was the UML Nationals.
Yep.
And Reuben was sending me some text while he's at the Nationals, basically saying it's one of the coolest matches that he'd been to. So I was curious. Mark, you were out hunting muleys at the time. I was curious, though, what is it that makes a match so awesome? What would provoke somebody to say is one of the coolest matches of all time?
I think, for me, it's a little bit of variety. So testing different skill sets out. Really, when you look at the concept of a national match, usually it's kind of a season finale. In this case, it was the season finale for UML. And so when I was, sending you all those texts, basically I was kind of recapping that, this match challenged you in a lot of different ways. And ultimately, the ending was kind of the culmination of all your year's work going into that match and all the different skills you practiced throughout the year. It definitely tested them.
Now, when you guys are saying UML, though, is that the same as 3-gun?
We can, we can actually talk a little bit about that because there are different, governing bodies or however you'd want to say it within the shooting sports, and this is, a fairly new one, but it's one that shows a lot of promise.
Okay, cool. Yeah, break that down a little bit if you can.
Yeah.
So you guys are kind of familiar with 3-Gun Nation, and then we have USPSA, and then there's kind of what you would say outlaw 3-gun, I guess.
Yeah, I would say we're going to fly by on 2 decades worth of power struggle in the sport. But yeah, realistically, it kind of evolved out of practical pistol shooting. So people we shoot this pistol game. It'd be cool to do this with rifles and shotguns. And then there are a couple prevalent rule books that spawned out of that. And then those kind of grew over time. And collectively, in the late 90s, there was maybe 3 to 5 major 3-gun matches a year. They were very autonomous. It was just kind of this guy's idea, and he did it the way he wanted to do it, and the guy over there did it his way.
Yeah, very regional, too.
There was 3-gun back in the 90s?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 3-gun actually has its roots in a shooting competition that came out of the Soldier of Fortune trade show in the 80s. So
I remember hearing something about that.
Yeah, so Soldier of Fortune put on a trade show, a shot like trade show.
Yeah, it
I
was kind of
wasn't
a
born yet,
military
so
law
I wasn't there.
enforcement type focus thing.
But yeah, they decided to have a shooting competition. It became the Soldier of Fortune multi-gun, and that was like the big bang of 3-gun.
Yeah, and those back in the day, like guys were plated up and like full on chest rigs and
You weren't allowed to scout stages.
Yeah, you didn't get to walk the stage and plan it out ahead of time. It was they were all blind stages, so literally they just like, you're gonna need all 3 guns on this stage, and here, go.
And what kind of stuff are they using, like M16s and stuff, or what?
A lot of it was like military themed.
Yeah.
So
M1As,
yeah, like
870s, 45 caliber 1911s, or Beretta M9s, SIGs. It had to be duty gear. It had to be, if you were using an optic, it had to be one that was in common usage in the military.
Which is kind of funny because you know, like a lot of guys watch 3-gun today, and if they're not into competitive shooting, you've heard the term like that'll get you killed on the streets. Well, like 3-gun spawned out of those guys.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
And what's even more interesting is that a lot of gear that was developed for 3-gun is now cool dude approved.
Yeah.
In the door kicking world.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's you're trying to accurately put rounds on target quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, I'm sure like not everything crosses over, but if you can get super good at fast reloads, I imagine that could come in handy
for sure.
Yeah.
Or a variety of things, skills, like you said, just everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess to carry on what Adam was talking about, like the competitive shooting thing into the 2000s really started to pick up, and more regional matches started popping up, and you started to see, in the late, I don't know, I guess I would say 2009, 2010, there started to become a little bit more organization into it, and an organization called 3-Gun Nation had this idea to have like a pro tour, right? So kind of like whether it be in motocross or car racing or whatever, they wanted to have like this designated set of, pro athletes. And so 3-Gun Nation started kind of a TV show to highlight these different pros and their skills and kind of follow them along this different circuit of matches, and then have an end of the year thing at SHOT Show, which you probably remember, Mark. There was kind of a shoot-off, like out in the desert, they would do it, and it was just a big head-to-head shoot-off. And so that kind of, from there, 3-Gun Nation started to change things up a little bit, and there's inevitably people that like the old way and people that like, the new way. And so out in Vegas, again, there's a dude named Pete Rensing, and Pete has got a long history of setting up and running big 3-gun matches. So currently he has Safari Land Expedition. He has the Surefire World Multi-Gun Championships. He has hosted the USPSA Multigun Nationals, which is their yearly kind of finale. And so he's a guy that's got all kinds of skill in setting up and efficiently running like good big matches, 300+ shooter events. Kind of like it happens, matches kind of start to get a flavor, and they get, the type of shooting you're going to shoot if you go out and shoot a Pete match. The type of shooting that we're going to do down in Texas with Jeremy, right? It's like big open terrain, long field courses with lots of long-range rifle. And then like the Pro Series in Tulsa, that was all in bays, and it was all fast shooting on the move.
Brian Corey's another name that you hear a lot, a very influential match designer.
Yep, Brian Corey. They all have their different flavors of setting up matches. And Adam, maybe you can go a little bit more into kind of how the USSL, the United Shooting Sports League, got started.
Yeah, so as 3-Gun grew, we had these organizations trying to bring everybody together under like a consistent set of rules and a consistent ranking system, things like that. And that's where 3-Gun Nation came from. They kind of went the direction of doing a TV show. I was on the show for 2 seasons, but it was kind of past its prime at that point. But 3-Gun Nation kind of latched onto it and tried to make a pro series and go in that direction to make a show that they could market to the industry. But they kind of still left this void for the masses of wanting this mainstream rule set that we could, you can shoot a UML match in Florida, Washington, New York, or Arizona, and it would be the same, much as it is in the pistol sports.
Yeah, because we should mention USPSA. If you shoot a USPSA pistol match or PCC or whatever in any different state across the country, the penalties are all the same. The way that it's scored is all the same. The different types of guns that are that'll put you in a different classification or a different division, or it's all the same. And so 3-gun has definitely been lacking that, if you can imagine. Now USPSA is kind of a nationally recognized organization that has a legitimate rule set, and it's actually a division or a branch of IPSC, which is the International Practical Shooting, kind of like we were talking about it with Josh, right? Freilich back on one of the other podcasts. And so IPSC is globally recognized as a rule set.
AKA IPSC.
Yep, IPSC.
Okay.
And so USPSA is kind of here in the States, if you're doing a pistol sport, it's, probably going to be IDPA or USPSA. And so 3-gun has been kind of lacking that standardization in terms of rules, in terms of scoring. And so
while USPSA sanctions some multi-gun, it's not the focus of that organization.
Right.
The focus of that organization is pistol shooting. So where USSL comes into it is Pete wants an organization that is focused on multi-gun, and there's a pistol faction of it, but he has the United Shooting Sports Leagues, under which there is the UPL, United Pistol League, which would be his version of USPSA, practical shooting. There's a
There's a steel league. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a steel league. So that's where, and under that is where like the shotgun matches fall.
And if you were trying to we also have Steel Challenge in the U.S., and that's a division of USPSA.
Yep.
And so Steel Challenge is actually a really, really popular sport. Like Cheyenne Dalton shoots it. Our buddy out west, Colby Pavlock, Chris Mercaldo, Steve Foster. There's all kinds of different people shooting Steel Challenge. And so the United Steel League, the USL, is the division within the USSL.
Yep. But the most active faction currently of this very small organization is UML, United Multigun League. So he set out his own standardized rule set, some unique scoring factions. I don't know if we want to talk about that or not, but
it's really practical though.
Yeah.
I mean, like the penalties are all very applicable. So to kind of like come full circle back to, where we were starting, like this match was kind of the culmination of the whole year of really the first year that UML has been an organization that people could join, have memberships, and host matches. They've been using the same rule set out in Vegas for a couple of years just to kind of beta test it. But we actually kicked off the USSL. Pete kicked it off in Vegas in 2018 SHOT Show. So this past SHOT Show, we had a match in Vegas right after SHOT Show got done. So we had all been working for 5-6 days out in the desert, and then we go and shoot for 2 days. And so that actually kicked off this year, and then this was the culmination of the whole year.
Gotcha.
Okay. So, explain, what would you see differently if you're at a UML matchup compared to another one?
So UML,
what's the other one? Would that be 3-Gun Nation?
It could be. It could be
3-Gun
USPSA.
Nation,
It could be Outlaw.
Okay.
I would say the biggest difference in UML is they have a couple different divisions. They have a couple unique divisions.
Yeah, Reub, you mentioned a couple to me in the text. You were like, 2x4. What the heck is that? Is that an example?
Well,
of one?
yeah, that's a great example. And I think part
3
of
isn't even in there.
yeah, so
It doesn't have 3
It's 4
and 2.
and 2.
And if you multiply those two together, it's 8. So what's going on?
All right,
So,
here's the deal.
That'd be a lot of
A
guns.
lot of math going on, and my big takeaway so far is that the shooting sports are built to test your acronym skills. That's all I've got so far.
I mean, there are a lot of military guys.
Yeah,
so
well, that explains.
Okay, all right.
But they're basically trying to encompass
wanna bring more
anyone who
people
wants
in.
to shoot.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Mark, you bring your, I know you don't have one yet, but let's just say you build a PCC or even just an AR, doesn't matter.
Yeah, basically just anything that's.
You guys don't even know what I'm up to right now. You
How
don't
long
even,
have we been?
you
What's
don't
the
even know, bro.
What's the month and year that we're in right
I'm
now?
really
That
free
would-
cat on. I can
don't-
take a guess.
We've been hearing about this thing.
All right, so
I got big plans.
Oh yeah.
let's just say that you like shooting your PCC a lot.
Sure.
Okay, it's a lot of times a gun that guys love to shoot because it's low ammo cost, low noise. You can shoot it at a lot of ranges. We've talked about that before. A lot of ranges that don't let you use centerfire rifle cartridges. And let's just say you want to shoot your PCC. There's actually a division where it's PCC only. And so if there were any flying targets or any long range targets, they'll paint a separate target for you that can be kind of your alternate target, or you just don't shoot at those long range
Explain
targets.
a flying target real quick, because my mind's eye is.
Clay pigeon.
A clay pigeon that can be activated by, a popper that tips over and hits a toaster popper that shoots it up.
Rube Goldberg kind of thing.
They shoot those with rifles?
No, but you'll shoot it with a shotgun.
Yeah.
And so since if you were shooting PCC only division, they would actually take that clay target out of the launcher, and 10 yards back they'll put a little 2-inch circle steel plate that you have to hit because it's also a very challenging plate.
When you say PCC only, you mean literally the only.
You could go to a 3-gun
PCC.
match and shoot the whole thing with PCC. That's what we're saying.
Okay.
So
I thought it was
UML
like
is hosting all the traditional 3-gun, multi-gun divisions, but they also have some more approachable divisions, some entry-level divisions. That was always the big hurdle. Like, I want to shoot 3-gun, but I don't have a shotgun. I want to shoot 3-gun, but I only have this pistol. So they kind of made the PCC division. They made the 2x4 division as also kind of a new flavor on something for people to try. But it was also meant to be a more accessible division, gateway drug. And once you most people who show up to shoot 2-gun end up picking up a shotgun and shooting 3-gun down the line.
Yeah.
So
First bump's free.
Were you getting into?
It's not. Free.
Were you getting into 2x4?
I did. So I jumped kind of like whole hog into 2x4 this year, which was part of just being I've shot 3-gun for a while now, a little change up kind of to bring another gun into the sport, but I really like 2x4 as a division because if you imagine like normal 3-gun, they're telling you kind of what guns to shoot, what targets with which targets to shoot with which guns, right? And so you kind of go in and it's just an execution of different skills. 2x4 is, imagine you have a golf bag. You have a shotgun, a rifle, a pistol, and a PCC in it. And on any stage, you walk up to a stage, you only get to use 2 of the guns in your golf bag or gun bag.
Oh, so you have 4 guns, but you only get to use 2 on a stage.
Yeah. So you go up to a stage, and you now have to do that. You have to solve that problem in the fastest way possible with 4 guns in your bag, but you only get to use 2.
How much time now are you pre-scouting that stage?
Yeah, we get the same amount
Okay,
of
so you're
time
not
to walk
walking up
ahead
to
of
it and going, okay, making an assessment, grab my 2 guns, and this is what I'm going to do.
No.
Yep.
Okay.
We're generally trying to
I got-
roll in the afternoon before the match starts, and we look at everything and decide all that.
I've got one more question because this kind of came up in a previous podcast when we were talking about, 3-gun or multi-gun and, scouting stages and blind stages. And it seems like, to me, you guys really like to be able to scout a stage.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I've done basically 0 competitive shooting.
But you've done a lot of scouting.
Yeah, I've done some scouting. But, do you guys like the blind stages?
No,
You don't.
not at all.
That's not fun to you? That mystery?
It's
The excitement?
that doesn't
the
like-
unknown?
It's
You
a
know,
question
get
of
that little feeling
competitive
in the pit of your
equity.
stomach?
That's where it's been tried before, but it gets to be an issue of competitive equity because either people cheat and they go and look, or
Somebody
guys
shoots
start
it,
to shoot it, they
and
come
then they go
back, and
tell
then
them,
they
"Oh,
They
start
start telling.
So it's
mouse
hard to
stare,
give
right.
everybody a fair and equal chance.
A couple
at
weeks
blind
ago, there was a very big national level event, and there was a blind stage at it, and it's probably like the biggest. Right now, the fallout from that is probably like the biggest drama in 3-gun, I would say. It was blind stage, and some people didn't know what to do, and some people did, and not as skilled people did really good and skilled people didn't do as good, and it just kind of flip-flops.
Controversy.
Oh, yeah, and even one of the better times that it was executed was probably at Ironman in 2014. One of our team members, the Gibsons, they held a match called Ironman, and they did a blind stage there, and they actually did it pretty well, but that particular match at the time was so big, they ran it on 2 weekends, and some people shot it both weekends. And so there were a couple guys who shot it the second weekend, and somebody else found out about it. It's drama every time.
Interesting.
Every single
That
time.
part didn't cross my mind.
What if you change the stage every time? It would
There's
take
a lot
forever.
of work in
It
a
would take
volunteer
forever.
sport.
That's a lot of work in a volunteer sport. And you're still going to get the competitive equity question.
Yeah.
Everyone has to have a fair and equal chance
then
at every stage.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure somebody's already thought of that before. But so let me ask you. So I'd have to imagine that watching 2x4, to me, that sounds like the most interesting to watch because every shooter might be different. Like I'd imagine eventually you probably start people probably kind of figure out the maybe best way or top 2 ways to go through the stage, but everybody has their own different strengths. Like me, I would never touch my shotgun, just like I never touch my driver at the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
And unless I had to. I don't know how it works.
So Dylan Easley and I both shot 2x4. I shot 2x4 open. He shot 2x4 tactical, which basically just means in my division I get to have a bipod and an extra red dot on my rifle, and then I could use a box fed shotgun like Adam and Josh use. Have a dot on your pistol and stuff, but I don't have all that gear, so I basically just put a bipod on my rifle and shot it as an open division competitor. But Dylan and I would have very similar stage plans. But even so, you still play to your strength. And so Dylan's a really strong pistol shooter, and so we would have parts where we'd go through the stage and kind of be talking it through. And then ultimately, on a couple of them, we just had to agree to disagree, and we shot it a little bit differently. But that was just because you're playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
There's also ways on the stage design front that they can draw out certain guns, because there are targets that you can't shoot with certain guns, or they can place targets that they can place a really long rifle shot next to some paper and not give you a dump barrel. So rifle's what's in your hand, so you're going to shoot with your rifle. Or they put one clay in the middle of an array of steel. Well, you need to shoot that with a shotgun, and there's no dump barrel around. That automatically means that the smart plan is the shotgun.
Yeah. Very interesting. Because like watching a regular 3-gun stage, it's kind of like watching a track meet. Everybody's doing the same thing, it's just who can do it fastest. But watching that would be kind of cool. It'd be like, oh, hey, you can run this track. You can run this 100-meter dash on your hands. You can run it on your feet. You can skip. You can
all fours.
Yeah, whatever you want.
It's all in the stage design as to what you can tempt people to do or what you can require people to do. So that's what we're excited to see that for next year, because I think there's some changes that'll come in the 2x4 realm
I think there's
draw that out.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a couple of big matches that next year will be using using UML rule set that'll allow some more divisions to open up. The other cool thing about UML is there's always a 2-gun division too. So there's a rifle pistol division. We actually locally run our 3-gun matches under the UML rule sets, and we get a lot of law enforcement guys that show up to shoot 2-gun, and so they'll just shoot rifle pistol the whole match.
Cool.
And is that because that's what
That's because
they're on duty?
Yeah, and they just, a shotgun is a breaching tool typically in law enforcement.
Right.
Otherwise, they'll shoot beanbags with it for, non-lethal or less lethal crowd-controlled stuff. And so the shotgun just isn't a tool that gets practiced a lot in the world of law enforcement. I don't mean that to be an all-encompassing statement, but if you had to take a sample size, you would see that, it just rarely gets touched.
Yep.
Yeah. So now let's try diving into the match here real quick, because what is it about the actual match that makes it really cool? Like was it stage design? Was it just the fact that whoever was running it made sure that you weren't like sitting around? There was
a bunch of factors. I think there was a bunch of factors that made it cool. There was the venue is a really cool place.
Where was it at?
It's at the Cawthon Cartridge Club, which is just west of Houston, Texas. Okay. So maybe an hour out into kind of between Houston and Austin. And so it's a cool club. They have a huge variety. They have some bays, and then they have a bunch of open terrain. One of the things that was really cool about this match in particular is this was my 5th match I've shot at that club, and there was a bunch of areas of the range that for this match were turned into shooting areas that have never been shooting areas before. So it was really cool. We were shooting out over a lake a couple of times, different stages. Had a couple of jungle runs through the mud where you ended up, down right on the shore of a lake shooting out targets across the water. There was a good variety of bay stages. So and think of a bay stage, you're putting up walls, shooting around walls, shooting traditional targets like plate racks and spinners and stuff like that. We shot off of a swinging bridge. We shot off of some, wobbly platform type stuff, I guess. And then, shoot. There was sawhorses and just a lot of different props incorporated into the match. The weather was great. We had, and maybe should have caveated this, but a lot of times you go to a match and it's just bay stages, all under 100-yard shooting or under 90-yard shooting. And then sometimes you go to a match like the Shooter's Source Vortex match in Texas, and it's like, you might have 40 or 50 targets over 200 yards. So it's, primary emphasis on long-range shooting with some other stuff mixed in. But this match was, we had long range, we had bay stages, we had jungle runs, we had shooting off of platforms. There was all kinds of props involved. There was a lot of spinner targets. There was some star targets. There was plate racks. There was hanging gongs. There was, several targets over 400 yards. It was I think a really good test, especially for a nationals, kind of a season finale type of match. There was just a really good variety.
variety.
It was like it tested out almost. If you had to take a little bit from every match you shot over the course of the whole year, it seemed like there was all the skills tested.
Yeah, and I would kind of echo that too. Like the origins of the sport kind of came from these really big terrain matches where they were kind of out on the topography of whatever that facility was. And then the pendulum kind of swung the other way in the Three-Gun Nation days into these really fast, like in the world of paintball, there's the ones where they have like the combat zone set up, and then there's speedball, where they're like on a basketball court. Well, Three-Gun kind of went that way too. Like when in Bay matches, it was really fast, it was really confined, it was super technical, but there was kind of some skills that got left out. And then this one has kind of swung back into the middle where you had all of those flavors. There was a time when you traveled around to matches and you're like, man, it was a fun match, but it didn't have this, or it was a fun match, but it didn't have that. This match had all of the pieces together.
Definitely.
And it would have even been bigger if they got a lot of rain the week before, so they actually had to pull in a lot of the long range stuff because some of the places they wanted to put long range targets were flooded.
Oh, okay.
So they couldn't. They wanted to do more, but it was the best. It was one of the better blends of all the different styles, all the different skills that we've seen throughout the year.
Yeah, and just the general, talking to people about the match too. That it seemed like people were having fun. It seemed like they were being tested. There's we had some very high level shooters. Daniel Jurasic, Jerry Michalik was there. There was Aaron Hayes and Adam, and there was just a very big variety of good shooters there too. So that it wasn't like the end of the year when everybody was burnt out and didn't want to shoot. There was actually a really good set of talent there.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And then the other cool thing about this one too, because people may have been noticing that we've been saying traditional nationals. If we look at the scoring system a little bit, there's a few different ways you can score Three-Gun. I'll try not to go too deep in the weeds. There's one way they can assign a certain number of points to a stage, say 100. Whoever does it the fastest gets all 100 points. Everyone gets a percentage thereof based on their time. Three-Gun Nation went a route where they did total time. So it's just raw time, and then penalties were added time in there. That was another way, total time. Pete has gone the route of basically that as a hybrid of those, in that the fastest time is the amount of points that stage is worth. So if you shoot a stage in 20 seconds, it's worth 20 points. If you shoot a stage in 70 seconds, it's worth 70 points. That kind of normalizes like somebody who crushed a really small stage doesn't get the same amount of points as somebody who did a really good job on a 120-second stage. 120 seconds is a long time in Three-Gun.
So people are shooting until they hit every target then?
Yep.
Okay.
Who clears, how long does it take you to clear the course, basically? And so under UML, to kind of preserve some of these flavors that people like, and there's people who definitely like total time, there's people who definitely like the old system, there's people who like terrain matches, there's people who like bay matches. So Pete set up 2 scoring systems, and they have 2 championships. So Expedition Multigun, which happened in June, it's happening in March, I believe, next year. That's the Expedition Multigun Championship. That is a lower tier of penalties. So they're like a miss is worth 2.5 seconds, or no shoot is worth 5 seconds. In traditional, going back to kind of original, that was something they kind of did for the Pro Series to keep everything moving along. In the old days, a miss was 5 seconds. A no-shoot penalty was 10 seconds. Failures to engage could be 30 to 60 seconds. So the penalties hurt more. And this being the traditional nationals has more higher values on the penalties. So what that does is it makes, you can create situations where, yes, I missed it, or yes, I'm going to take that penalty, but it's not going to hurt me enough that I'm going to go back and fix it. You just kind of took the nick and keep going. In traditional nationals, all the penalties hurt.
Yeah, it really makes I think in any discipline, if the penalties are of a higher value, you're going to take your time more, and it's a better test of skill. I think.
That's what just intuitively, as you guys were walking us through that, I was picturing, if those penalties are going to hurt a lot more, I'd want to be more deliberate and take more time and care when engaging those targets.
Yep. And so like, you know, a lot of the matches that I've shot this year have been kind of that expedition style. So that's kind of the approach that I had. And I know I'm in the same swimming pool as Jerry Micklick, so like you're not gonna coast and beat Jerry. So like you gotta throw it out there and put the hammer down. Well, I would get a penalty, you know, so I would have a pretty good time, but I'd have a 5-second penalty. You know?
Gotcha.
Whereas in expedition, that's okay. So it's like, oh well, failure to neutralize, that's all right. Whereas here it's like failure to neutralize dropped you a few places pretty fast. So, so that kind of stuff hurts more, and it affects the strategy of the match. So under the umbrella of UML, there's Expedition Championships, that's the Safariland match. There's the Traditional Nationals, which is this match, and then I believe next year they're culminating in the overall championship of UML, which is Surefire, the Surefire World Championship.
Okay. I gotta imagine that can be a little bit difficult because if you're like, do people switch back and forth between types of matches that they're shooting in? Like,
Yep.
Like, you know, you have to really drill it into your head. Oh, this is a traditional match where if I take a couple shots at this target and decide for whatever reason I'm having bad luck with it, I can't just necessarily move on, you know, or
Yep.
that'd be pretty
like
tough.
A gun
Or
malfunction
sometimes
or something, and like, well, it's not worth making it up. It's like, no, dude, that was 7.5 seconds. Like,
Yeah.
you probably could have cleared your gun out and reloaded it and shot in 7 seconds.
or vice versa. Some dude's sitting there really, really trying on one target, and you're like, it's
Everyone's
2.5 seconds,
like
man.
air screaming in the back, like, keep going,
Just go.
just keep going. You know, like they had it. You know, the first gun they shot is their rifle. They're one of the what was it? The first stage of the match, that guy blew his rifle apart. He like cracked his
problem?
barrel.
Yeah, the
Like,
barrel split.
It split like just a hair. Like, I'm at a loss for an analogy, but just a hairline crack all the way through, all the way down the barrel,
It was really loud.
lengthwise.
Ooh.
So his barrel is just screwed, but he's still got a stage full of targets. He could throw that thing in the barrel and start shooting a bunch of stuff with pistol to do damage control.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, oh, you know, he gets stuck on this thing. Everyone's like, move on, just keep going. Take the penalties on the things you're going to get penalties on, but you can still make a lot of points as long as you don't get sucked into.
Yeah, but his
fixing
gas
this
block
thing.
and gas tube blew off, so he kind of stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, he got lucky and the ROs stopped him. Once the range officer stops you, then if something like that happens, you're entitled to a reshoot, which is really lucky for him. But like,
That is.
it's kind of an example of something where you could get sucked into something that could cost you a lot of time, but if you have the presence of mind to shoot everything else and just throw it in the barrel.
Yeah. If I'm in a competition and my rifle blows up, I think that I'm just gonna. I think you just need a second to just think about stuff.
I think that would
That'd be
rattle
my
it.
personal reaction to a rifle blast in a competitive situation. I don't know, but
I think that
Yeah.
would rattle anybody's cage a little bit.
when people aren't shooting back at me, I'd say I'd probably take a second.
Oh,
put it
like
in
when I was
perspective,
mule deer hunting
people-
this last week?
So it
Yeah.
was on. Never mind.
But
Just so people don't think we're crazy, like when we say blow up, like his barrel split apart. So
We had to take it apart to see that it happened.
the cartridge didn't generate any pressure.
Okay.
So it was like it made a weird sound and then it didn't cycle. So he tried to cycle it again. Well, the cartridge ripped apart too. So like he couldn't get another cartridge in there. So they're playing
It was
around
safe.
with it. It was safe. It didn't like, there wasn't like fireball
Grenade.
and bloody body parts everywhere. Like,
all right.
Well, I wasn't picturing that, but I did have a different mental picture
Yeah.
when you guys.
Minus the bloody body parts.
Yeah,
I was
it was
thinking
more like
explosion.
10 minutes later when we were looking at his rifle trying to
Yeah.
figure out why it wouldn't cycle. We are like, oh,
like,
because
oh,
the barrel's
hey.
cracked all the way down.
Whoops. So
sounds like a tuning fork now.
So this is slightly off topic, but it's going back to what we talked a little bit about with the different styles of matches. These base stage style matches, these maybe open terrain, jungle runs, things like that. Some of the more open terrain, jungle run type stuff, is that fairly unique? Like now now internationally speaking to the US. And the reason I ask that is because when we talked to Josh a while back, who went out to that IPSC Shotgun World Championships, he mentioned how a lot of those shotgun stages would be just lightning fast. I mean, like as quick as like 5 seconds or something like that.
Well,
Is that, do they generally run that stuff kind of like real quick and fast, or do they also have, maybe that was just shotgun? I don't know.
I think, looking back a little bit, maybe if the roots had been the same, like our roots were within kind of a military law enforcement thing with Soldier of Fortune, And so people kind of grew to expect to be able to get out and do different stuff, like more exciting stuff with your gun, like running through the woods, shooting targets. Traditionally overseas, they don't want it to be militarized, right? Because they're
because all sporting,
different
right?
government structure and thoughts on shooting than we have here in the U.S. And so, so there it's like a sport. So they're executing. Like in the U.S., if you shoot USPSA, you'll have classifier stages, and those classifier stages are very much like a test of skill. And so you'll get guys that all year they'll set up that stage because it's on the USPSA website, the classifier stages that you have to shoot for the year. So you just print those off and go and set them up at a range and practice it 300 times a month. Yeah, you're going to be good at that, right? And so a lot of what they're doing in that IPSC world of shotgun shooting and IPSC rifle, which I think IPSC rifle will be held this coming year, a lot of what they're doing is stand and execute. So it's basically you have these targets, you have to shoot. There's no movement involved or very little movement involved in a lot of those stages. Because I think Josh was saying for every one field course, the long field course, they had to have 2 medium stage and 3 stand and shoot small stages, right? Mm. So we don't really... I think the general consensus is that here in the States, we don't really like that. It's just not fun.
It doesn't seem super dynamic, It seems very structured.
It's a test of shooting.
Kind of like something you could just do at a range by yourself, which you kind of alluded to.
It's also kind of intended as like an attraction or a vacation. Like most of these people are spending their vacation money to come here, so they kind of want a spectacle. So they don't, they can stand and shoot 5 targets at home on their home range. When they pay the big match fee and travel all this way, take the time off work, they kind of want this bigger than life thing, and that kind of spawned into people who specifically sought the natural terrain matches because they wanted the big terrain, and then that turned into a marketing thing where match directors would say, "We have a natural terrain match.
We get to shoot out of a helicopter. We get to shoot out of a tank. We get to shoot out of an MRAP.
Mm-hmm. Like it works for me,
dude. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, like in." Like the governor's match this year, we shot out of that Ford Raptor with the big cage on it. Like Jeremy's match down in Texas, we shoot out of a helicopter. Like, people like shooting out of different props and and kind of like we like stuff to be a little more extreme. We have Tough Mudders and we have all kinds of different, Spartan races and stuff. And that's people just like to get a little bit more out of their shooting sports. And it's funny because you do see a little in the guys that come from overseas to shoot matches once in a while. And we'll look at a stage and be like, "Oh man, it's all muddy down there. Like, everything's gonna get dirty," and like kind of semi-excited for it. And the overseas guys that come, whether they're here for SHOT Show and they decide to stay for a couple matches, or they come up from Brazil or whatever, and they'll look at like the mud and they'll be like, "That's not fair for everybody because it's not going to be as muddy."
It's not a competition anymore.
Yeah,
is what the flip side of that is.
Yeah,
and that's where people started calling things bay matches or terrain matches.
Yeah.
Is kind of
the idea of a bay match too is that it's all going to be very equitable. The stage
same for everybody.
Fault lines are going to be perfectly laid out. It's going to be the same for everyone. And we get rain or we get mud and snow, and it ultimately changes a little bit. But the idea is that it's going to be the exact same for everybody, and then the scores are going to reflect true shooting skill versus
versus
somebody's
the mud was drier when he shot, so he had better footing.
And that was the thing at this match. It rained the second night.
Yeah.
So people shot stages that we shot when they were bone dry.
Yep.
They shot them in the mud and vice versa. So we'd be looking at some stages like some jungle run stages, which get to be kind of a nightmare when they get muddy. It's like, man, I have to shoot the stage in the mud. Jerry had dry ground yesterday.
We had a couple of stages where there's 200 yards of movement. And we were over on the jungle. We were kind of on the jungle run / field courses on the second day when it was muddy. Mm-hmm. And we shot the bay stages on the first day when it was dry. And we got over to finish up a couple of the bay stages on the second morning. And there was one stage where it was at least 6 inches of water that people were running in when you were shooting.
Yeah.
While you were shooting, like on the clock.
Or, I mean, it also turns into a little bit kind of like the rally stuff for the off-road motorsport stuff, too. It kind of gets to be a bit of line choice, too, because, when everybody starts walking through in the morning, they're walking this one place.
Wheel rutted and get it out.
And so, that was actually one of my strategies on that jungle run stage in particular. to the right-hand side, 2/3 of the trail to the right-hand side was where everybody was walking. It got greasy and slick, and then it tapered down into a ravine where the water was draining out. In the walkthrough, I actually walked through the ravine and found out that the footing in there was actually better.
Yeah.
And so I actually like pretended not to walk through it for most of our stage because I was towards the end so that nobody else would go down there. But when I went to shoot, I ran straight through the stream where the water was because that's where better footing was. You know?
Yeah.
I ran through the mud in my baseball cleats.
In rally, they call that the poo sauce. And if somebody else's job is to be the first one to go through the poo sauce, you know that they just have the crap job. They can push all the poo sauce off and then bring up some of that like grippy mud
That
on the
loam,
bottom, that like
yeah.
dirt.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. That's fun stuff.
You just made yourself a memorable quote.
That's just good information to know.
You need that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to tell my 2-year-old that.
Oh, she'll love it.
Don't walk in the poo sauce, honey.
She'll love it. All that is very interesting, though. I feel like there's so many comments that you could bring up about like the competitive nature too of things, and like, you know, should people think it's a big deal if like one person had a muddy stage and one person didn't when you're at a natural terrain match? It's like,
I kind of feel like that's what you signed up for.
Right, well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
yeah.
hear you there, but then at the same time, you know, it's kind of like
Until you're the guy who loses because of that.
right,
you know?
right, and then
that's
it's
where that comes from.
Yep, and then you're like, okay, you know, I'm a man, I'm 40, you know, like, should I be getting mad about like going and I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's just
but
so
we're all
many.
competitive.
We're all competitive,
I'm not
but there's
actually 40,
so
by
many
the way,
variables,
but-
though.
There's
You know,
always
it's like-
going to be variables.
You know, it's like maybe it was more muddy for you, but the wind was blowing Mach 4 for this guy. I would
Right,
have to think
yeah.
a lot of stuff comes out
Yeah.
in the wash at the end.
It really does. It's hard to keep that in perspective when you're a competitor, but like especially if you ever get to be on the match admin side, you know, then it's kind of like, no, it kind of all works out because you can see the bigger picture.
You see the bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, like
You get to hear all the whining and then
I-
you get that big picture.
everybody has something that you're gonna whine about. One of the things that I wanted to whine about at first was that a bunch of targets on one of the stages weren't pasted when I went to shoot them. You know, to the effect of 6 or 7 paper targets. They all had two 9mm holes in them when I went to shoot the stage, and I was shooting a 9mm carbine at those targets. And so I was kind of like, you know, if you spot your hits, it can slow you down because you're thinking like, whoa, why does that one have 4? Did I shoot that twice?
You should have just gamed the system and been like, well, I'm done with that one.
Yeah, I should have just shot once over each of them. But
Which one's mine?
you know, it's not a matter of arguing because like I should have been happy because they all had hits on them and I could have just ripped fast through them, right? But what if one of them had a no shoot and they, you know, and then I got that no shoot penalty whereas the guy before me shot it? Or you know, the half a second or second that it takes you to process, like when you see that those already have holes on them. And it takes you a second to process it, and you're like, oh, okay, they probably just forgot to get pasted. Well, you're on the clock. You're supposed to be kind of functioning in the subconscious mind, and now all of a sudden you get sucked back out. And then,
I mean, that seems
but then you look
confusing.
at it, and it's like, okay, well, you know, between me and the next guy on that stage, there's 4 seconds of difference, and so it's like it kind of just worked out anyways. But at the top, when it's really tight, it's hard to swallow that one.
Well, yeah, especially if you're really good and you're like actually competing to be in the top section, you know, it starts to turn into something more competitive. Even me though, like I'm not very good. And I remember when I went to my first one, it was kind of like, dude, I'm going to be shooting guns. Like, why would I get pissed about anything? But then somebody says ready, set, go, and a little thing goes beep, and all of a sudden just natural caveman instincts take over. And it's like, must be best.
Very few people.
I screw up, mad.
Man, there's some people that'll carry that with them, but very few people will let those equity problems really get to them for more than a couple of hours after it happens.
Yeah.
You're kind of over it. I mean, unless it really took you out of the match. Like on that same stage that I saw those targets weren't pasted, I also ran up to the barricade, propped my bipod up, and my bipod snapped off and broke and fell onto the ground, rolled 10 feet
That was
from
really
me.
funny, by the way.
And then the circus
Snapping
show started.
The circus show.
Yeah, after that happens, when you break a piece of gear, it's like, yeah, the half a second that it took me to realize those targets weren't pasted versus the 10 seconds watching my freaking bipod roll down the hill. Yeah, you can't really argue that one.
It's the pits, man.
Well, it sounds like it was a cool match.
It was a ton of fun.
It does. Anything else you guys want to sum up on that bad boy though before we cap this description off? We've actually talked about way more than just this match. I don't even know if we. Is there anything else?
Do you want to talk about the best part of Vortex Nation?
Best part?
Well, I think there were a lot of cool things that happened. We had some good interaction with our friends down in Texas who, we love, as you guys know, we love going down to Texas and visiting with all the different members of Team Vortex and then just all of our customers that we get to interact with on the range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of Vortex shooters at the match, and
cool.
I think a lot of people had good performances.
And Vortex swept every division.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, a Vortex shooter won every division.
Yeah, so
which is always really exciting. It's only happened a few times. I mean, usually we have a lot of top people, but to sweep every division is kind of a unique thing.
So Adam, I mean, I guess when you break that down, if you want to win, you should have a Vortex on.
Yeah,
You're right. Okay,
Yep.
Gotcha.
Nice.
nice. Was going for a subtle sell on that one, but that works.
Call 1-800.
Buy my product.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a couple funny things happen. Some cows got on the course.
Oh,
yeah. So we had a couple of you might have heard of a rain delay. We had some cow delays.
Cow delays.
That was fun.
Longhorns?
Yeah, they were. I think
they were actually.
We got to shoot over some lakes. Had some fun mud problems, getting stuck in the mud, stuff like that. Got to see Jerry Mitchellek. I mean, that's
The legend himself.
a plus there.
Was he shooting the 50?
No,
He goes for something lighter for competition, huh?
typically.
Still my favorite video of his.
Yeah, get some.
Get some. What
Sweet.
do you think? Mark,
Wrap
you
it
got
up?
anything? How about we wrap it up?
Some last calls.
Last calls. Let's call it out. You guys go first, because I don't know what I'm going to say yet.
I would say, if you're in this space, if you're competition shooting, you're looking at. I mean, this is the time of year folks start looking at matches for next year. I would say that UML Traditional Nationals or any of the UML series matches for next year is something you definitely need to put on your schedule and get to as many as feasibly possible.
Jimmy gave me a little dig about keto a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys to check out the Subaru Rally team. Jimmy's rocking the water bottle and the tee today.
The T?
The T-shirt.
Oh, shoot. I am. Oh, man. I'm so branded. Dang it.
There's a little get back from the keto jokes.
Video.
If you're not involved in competitive shooting, give us a call. We'd be happy to chat with you about how to get started. If you're in military and law enforcement and you hate your shotgun, there's a sport for you. And I'm going to start something here. We need to see how many episodes we can go before we get Mark to finish his AR.
Yep.
I'm going to say it's going to be at least 5.
5?
At least.
He ain't getting it done before
No,
Christmas.
no, you're
way
taking it the
is it?
wrong way. Mark is not
Reuben,
going to get
I mean,
his 3-gun.
I'm pretty
When it's
sure
ever
like I
gonna
need
happen.
I'm pretty sure I need a spring. I mean, these things take time.
You won't
Spring.
have that done
What do you-
in
like
the
a
next
season
5
or a
episodes.
part?
Oh, like a part. You're missing one part.
Like
which
I
is-
think I'm missing one.
I
You
don't
won't have
believe
it done
you.
in the
You
next
haven't.
month.
We have not seen a
It
single
hasn't
part.
been a priority.
It
You're
hasn't
not going
been.
to have it done in the next month. That's all there is to it. Prove me wrong.
I
Insert
haven't
picture
even
of
I'm
me
seen-
trying
and
to I'm
Steven
trying to
Crowder
play
with
coy
the
right
thing
now.
that
You guys
says,
don't know what I've
"Prove
got
me wrong."
cooking.
I haven't even seen a takedown pin out of you, and
Mark,
apparently.
I'm pretty sure I've given you stuff for that dang thing, and it hasn't started yet.
And what spring could you what lower parts kit screwed you over so bad that it was like, oh, you know what? That one spring.
Here's my last call. Why is everybody yelling at me? There. How about that?
All
We're
right.
not yelling. It's more of an intervention.
That's a good last call. I was a little quick. I was actually going to defer to you just to do your last call before mine because I'm still at a loss.
All right, I'm going to come up with a real last call. And
Real last call?
this is a real last call.
right.
Kind of a question, but for a person like you're talking about this being accessible. So you guys, really high level. I mean, you guys are talking about, your match schedule for like an entire season, right? is this, and I'm going to test my own acronym skills, UML.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something, if you were just getting into it, would this be a really good entry point? Like you're saying, you don't necessarily have to have like a pistol, a rifle, and a shotgun. You can pick one thing.
Yep.
You can pick, I guess, 3 things. You can pick 2x4 things.
This is the place to start.
This is the place to start. Okay.
And if you're at all at a loss for how to do it, call into the main number, hit 1502, and we'll talk about it.
Get our feelings out. I like
Let's
it.
talk about it.
Oh, that leaves me.
Spotlight.
I don't know. I'm having a rough time with this one. PCC is cool, though. I have a PCC. I think I mentioned that in one of the last ones. More recent ones. It took me like 2 years to finally get right. Actually, it felt very Mark-esque because I had a lot of the parts, minus the proper buffer spring to make it work.
And have them aged properly in the drawer.
Yeah,
like a fine whiskey.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotta leave it
or
there
like
for a little while.
Yeah, like a good wine.
Yeah.
But now it works, and it's a lot of fun. PCCs are cool. For whatever reason, I think they're cooler than regular rifle, 5.56 ARs and stuff like that. I just think they're cooler. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because when I use one, I feel like it's like the closest thing I have to an MP5 and to being in like a James Bond movie and stuff.
They're kind
Feels
of
like a
quiet.
submachine gun. They're kind of quiet. You put a can on one, they're really quiet.
You just listed off like 20 things that makes them awesome.
Yeah, they're awesome. That's all I got.
That sounds pretty cool.
We got to shoot a match with one. No. Okay. On that note, let's end it with a bye.
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 Bye-bye.
All right. That'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. Leave us a review or comment down below. We want to hear what you have to say about the show. Maybe what you like, maybe what you didn't like, so that way we can make these podcasts as good as they can be. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'll be posting about each episode released, so that way you can go back, find these things, maybe grab a little nugget of information that you could take with you to the range, out in the field, or maybe to the kitchen if we're talking about some good food. So, again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.